You know what I did not do? I did not add my intro. Shit, I totally forgot to do that. All right, now, for real this time, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, let's do it. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you. Have you picked up your copy of Beyond UX Design, Master Your Craft Beyond Pixels and Prototypes in paperback yet? Unlock the secrets of UX success and learn all the things they didn't teach you in school. Listen until the end for an exclusive code to get 10% off your copy. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/book to learn more. This week's episode is brought to you by Wix Studio. If you're thinking about redoing your portfolio or kicking off a new website project, listen up. I only have 30 seconds to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things that you can do from start to finish in 30 seconds or less on Studio. You can adapt your designs for every device with responsive AI. You can jump seamlessly between front end and back end. You can speed up projects with an AI code assistant. You can start a design library. You can reuse full-stack apps and UI components across multiple sites. Well, time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio and see for yourself. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/Wix to start creating today. This week's episode is brought to you by Jeff White and his UX Storytelling Toolkit. Now, lots of people talk about the importance of storytelling, but Jeff brings actionable clarity to the concept, and he shows you exactly how to do it. He breaks down different real-world scenarios like how to use storytelling methods to present your work, how to craft a better case study, and how to prep for job interviews. And I love Jeff's approach to storytelling here. It's not your simple once upon a time kind of stuff. And since you're an amazing listener, and I know this course will help you out so much, I'm stoked to get everybody listening a 10% discount if you use the code BeyondUX when you check out. So head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/storytelling and use the code BeyondUX to get 10% off Jeff's course. So learn some incredible techniques to influence your team and advance your UX career. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, and Marty for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get rough transcripts and exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. You can get instant access to the video archives right now for as little as $5 a month. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. So there's one thing that I see on literally every single bootcamp case study that has maybe ever crossed my eyeballs. That is personas. And everybody's got them. Everybody wants to use them. The question that we have today, my friend Jen Blatz is going to join the show today, and she's going to help us understand if personas are really the right approach, and maybe, just maybe, there's a better way. So I am so excited to have Jen Blatz join the show today. Jen Blatz is a principal UX researcher at BECU, the co-founder of the UX Research and Strategy Group, and now spends time on YouTube, hanging out on our channel, Blatz Chats, all one word. Jen, welcome to Beyond UX Design. I am so excited to have you on. How the hell are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me, Jeremy. I am excited to be here too.
Right on. All right. So I read that little brief bio, but you have been doing UX research for a really long time. And firsthand, I'm sure you have seen how often personas actually get used and how valuable they really are. And how much effort people generally don't spend making personas, which ends up being a lot of times why they aren't as valuable as they probably could be. But just tell us a little bit about you. How'd you get into this game, and what ultimately led you to the realization that personas are not the best approach here?
Sure. Well, Jeremy, I actually come from a graphic design and journalism background. So during my career, kind of more from a graphic designer in print, of all things, working at a newspaper, and then into UI design, visual design, then UX design. And eventually, I kind of fell in love more with learning about the problem than designing the solution for the problem. So that's where I really got heavy into UX research, because I just got more excited about learning what's going on than going back to my computer and popping open Sketch or Photoshop back in that day and coming up with the solutions for those things that I was learning about. So that's where I've kind of changed my perspective a little bit from designing the solution to learning more how to get to the solution. Now, when it comes to personas, you said something earlier that everybody wants them. I don't know that that's true. I think everybody feels like they need to have them. Oh, executives say, I'm fighting this right now. Executives want personas. And I'm like, why? It feels like a UX theater checkbox. Oh, we got to have personas. Just like you said in the boot camp case studies you're seeing. Check, got the persona there. So, yeah, lots of people have experience with personas. They're often not built well. And let me ask you, Jeremy, you have a few years of experience. When did your team use a persona around a discussion or a feature direction or design decision? Tell me about a time when your team pulled out personas and said, we're going to reference this as we have discussions about things.
Yeah. So it's funny because our team, we had the same point of view as you, that personas are probably not helpful. And one of the things that we tried to do, and I'll get to whether or not this was successful or not, but we tried to create just a very low fidelity, very simple living document. We tried to create a very simple website that we could share with our product managers, product partners, stakeholders to really get them to try to use this and really go away from the sort of standard marketing persona that you kind of see with the picture and all this, fluffy crap. And we called it the UX playbook. Set it up so that it would be used as a discussion. And the UX team, for our part, I think we did a really great job of trying to get people to talk about it. And I think we did a good job of talking through it in meetings and things like that. The problem was no one else used it. And so, the persona is not really useful for a UX designer who knows their users in and out, right? It's meant for people outside of the UX team to get a better understanding of the people they're building software for. And unfortunately, we were never able to get traction with it at all. So to answer your question, I think we did a good job of it, but that really isn't the mark of success, I don't think. So I don't know what your thoughts are, but.
Exactly. That is my point. We spend a lot of time and effort, even if it's a quick and dirty persona like you're talking about, or a proto persona, I guess is the proper term. We spend a lot of effort building these, doing the research, and no one uses them. And they look great. And we feel like they're jam-packed full of powerful information that help drive decisions, but no one ever fucking uses them. What's the point? So what is the point? Jeremy, you mentioned something earlier about marketing personas. And for those who may not be familiar, that's what executives are asking for. They want photo, they want age range, they want salary range, and that information, that demographic information leads to stereotypes. So let's try this out. And be gut honest with me, Jeremy, when I say, what comes to mind when I say an executive at a bank? Describe that person for me right off the top of your head. You have them in there. What are they?
It's probably an old white dude with a clean shaven, I imagine. If they're not wearing a suit, they're wearing a quarter zip vest, most likely. And maybe this is just my bias, how I see executives. But yeah, they probably drive a Beamer or a Mercedes, most likely, and very, very, very little involvement in the day-to-day.
Exactly. Did you see how much stereotypical information you included there?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Exactly. That is the problem with marketing personas. You jump to conclusions about people. And hey, maybe you know a bank executive and you think he's an asshole. So you're not very positive about that person because you've attributed certain personality traits or psychographic traits that, like you said, Jeremy, bias you. And so this is why I think including even a photograph, even if it's AI generated or a stock photo, we all know that's not the real person because a persona is not a single person. It's a conglomerate of an archetype, right? And then when you include, their age range from 26 to 30, funny, how can I be 26 to 30? I'm only 1 year. So how can I be all these different things? Like that demographic information is just trash. And that's what executives want in personas. Now, I don't know if you've ever had the circumstance, but I have had the circumstance where I was making, based on research, there's another thing, we'll come back to that. I was making personas, UX personas, And my executives were like, oh, where's all the demographic data? How old is this person? What's their income range? What's their job role? That's another one that could be problematic. And I'm like, you don't need to know that. That has nothing to do with their pain points and their motivations. And they're like, oh, yes, you have to put that stuff in there. That's what makes a persona. And I'm like, no, no.
What's interesting though, I feel like maybe you have experience here, but a lot of the executives, they go to, MBA, they get a master's business administration, and they end up with a lot of marketing classes and things like that tied to that. And so they're learning about personas in a lot of those classes. And those are totally different, I think, from the type of work that we're trying to do when we're designing and building software. And what's interesting, and I to be honest, like my experience has mostly been on internal enterprise software teams, and we're not a lot of times building commercial external facing software. And so I haven't had the experience with the marketing persona requests with the demographics and things like that, because the executives that I generally work with know we're building for internal teams. And so I guess that question is probably moot. But I'm curious, do you think that could have something to do with it? Like sort of the people that we're speaking to are sort of speaking to two different people, because a lot of those executives, they might actually be also talking to marketing teams. And unfortunately, marketing teams and software teams very rarely work together.
Very rarely. And when they do, I've been there. It's a bit of a pissing match in a territorial war. So that's a whole different problem. But yes, Jeremy, I see what you're saying, and I think that's true. Marketing personas is more exposed. It's what people learn about. So that's what their mind goes to. That's what they think a persona is. And when you try, and that, to be fair, a lot of them are including motivations and goals and pain points. They're starting to include that in their personas, right? They realize, oh, just putting that she drives a pink car and has 2.4 kids, that's not going to help her determine what kind of candy bar she's going to buy. And that's what marketing personas are. They are built for marketing, for consumers, to get people to come in the door for business. Where, to your point, Jeremy, UX personas are about behavior and how they are using our product. Now, I've worked internally too. I have done enterprise personas. And what I find interesting is a lot of times they'll do them based on a job role. And there's some validity to that. If you're a call center rep, you're using certain tools, you're accomplishing certain tasks, you've got certain things that you're doing. But your company could have hundreds of call center reps. They're not all going to be the same. So just slapping a job role on somebody isn't an effective way to build a persona around them either.
Yeah. So that was the next thing I was going to say, is because for us, personas made no sense. We ended up going with sort of the roles, and we did, to be honest, looking back on it, what we were doing wasn't exactly jobs to be done framework, but we started using the jobs and the pressures that the people were under and things less, whether or not, Susie drove a Tahoe and liked to go to Starbucks was irrelevant for their task as, a mechanical engineer or whatever thing they were doing. And so we started to lean more towards the jobs to be done framework. And so this is where I wanted to go next, is the personas, and especially the marketing personas, generally are not great for software. So what is the answer though? So you mentioned a little bit like talking about jobs. You started talking about roles, which is not jobs we've done, but talk a little bit about the alternatives and maybe what's the better way here? What should people be doing?
I love jobs to be done. I'm a big fan. I've used that theory a lot in my own research. Big fan of Jen Blatz book, the Jobs to be Done playbook. And I have used that I have used that theory a lot. And what I like about it is that it is company or product agnostic. So it's not, how are they using this app? How are they using our app to solve their problem? It's how the hell are they solving the problem? So what's great about it is it gets you thinking more broadly around how they're trying to accomplish a task or do a thing, right? Versus how are they using us to do that thing? Now, it can be tricky to get product folks to think that way because they're always a solution. How am I going to get my app in this conversation? And I'll admit, I have had to bastardize it a bit and say, we're going to do jobs to be done, but we will focus on our product. Because if you don't do that, sometimes you can't get buy-in to participate in something like that because they're like, why do you care how they're doing a thing when you're not talking about our stuff? So I get it, right? But I love Jobs to be Done because it's timeless, can be done at any time, right? It can be done it spans years and months, and it really focuses on the person's task, what they're trying to do. And if you do take the devices and the apps out of it, it helps you get a more encompassing picture of what that person's actually trying to accomplish. You know the story of the milkshake story and that sort of thing, how that came to be and how that relates to Jobs to be Done. And so I really love that. I share that story with others when they want to understand why it's
Yeah.
important to know what they're trying to do versus how they're trying to use our thing to do it.
Yeah. Now people listening might not be aware. Do you want to tell a story?
Sure. So Clayton Christensen, who was one of the fathers of Jobs to be Done, was hired by McDonald's to sell more milkshakes for us. And so he wanted to understand, why are people buying milkshakes? What it led to is, in what ways are people satisfying their hunger? And so maybe they would not eat a bagel because it was messy on the train and it would get all over the place and they don't want to touch the train after eating a bagel. Maybe they wanted a granola bar, but that wasn't satisfying enough. I'm still hungry right after I ate a granola bar, right? A lot of these participants were commuters, either driving or riding a train in. But the milkshake was a good solution to solving their hunger because it was filling. It didn't make a mess. It's contained in a cup, right? And it's easy to drink and it tastes pretty good. So, knowing the motivations and the reasons why people are trying to satisfy hunger versus why are they buying my milkshake is a way to understand and open opportunities to explore more.
I love that. Yeah, it's an awesome story. And one of the things that I love about Jobs to be Done, and I know we're not necessarily talking about service design here, but I love that idea though of thinking about it more holistically and thinking about what people are doing before they need to do a thing, after they need to do a thing, where are they going next, and how does this all fit into the larger system? And because my experience, and this is why I like Jobs to be Done, especially for enterprise, is a lot of times enterprise teams, they're building, giant software teams are building multiple products that all, in theory, talk to each other because it's a lot of times internal, or it's a suite of tools that a user might be buying and having to use one or the other, and they're hopping from tool to tool and things like that. And I love the Jobs to be Done framework because it lets you think at a higher level and sort of look down, on the balcony of like, what are these people doing and where are they going and how are they going from one tool to the other? And when you think, especially like journey maps, for instance, a lot of times they're done within one product and it's just this journey within a product, and I know journey maps and obviously personas and Jobs to be Done are very different, but it's sort of that similar kind of thing where you're just sort of laser focused on that one thing. And I love the idea of like zooming out and thinking about the whole service and the end to end. Really, like I have a need, I need to finish a thing, and that starts outside the app and it ends outside the app usually. So anyway, I don't know. I just love that. I love that idea of thinking more
I do too.
holistically.
I also love that Jobs Can Be Done has a qualitative and a quantitative partnership. You don't have to do all of it to get value out of the theory. You can just do the qualitative interviews, map out their process, understand what they're trying to do. Or you can do the quantitative side where you're trying to find opportunities in the market, right? Okay, you've learned about what these people are trying to do. And then you take that survey and learn how well that's going for them and what are the opportunities for it to get better. And so it's really great for businesses who are trying to like, should we get into the market doing this? That's where Jobs to be Done can surface those opportunities there too.
I want to circle back to personas because when we kicked off the conversation, the critique wasn't necessarily that personas themselves are bad. It's that teams aren't necessarily doing them correctly, or they're not doing enough research, or we're using them incorrectly in conversation. So I'm curious, when you think about personas, when are they valuable? When should you be using them? And how can we actually get value out of personas? Or is your advice just nobody's got the time and the money and the resources, so screw it and just skip it and don't even try? Because it could be the answer is, a half-assed persona is worse than no persona at all. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts? That was a very loaded question, by the way. But
No, that's fair. Can I say it depends? I mean, it's
yeah. I mean,
we
that's not like
haven't
the
said
standard
that
answer.
yet,
You have to
so
say right.
that's kind of a gimme, right? It depends. I think it depends on your team. How motivated are they to really be user centric? There's a lot of lip service out there that says, yeah, we want to be making things for the user, provide value. But do you really though? I don't know. I don't believe them all the time. But yeah, personas, I mean, I love the research that goes into personas. I love the things that you learn from doing that research. But I have found that the output, which is the persona, is just not utilized. The juice may not be worth the squeeze if you're doing them properly, right? Like there's proto personas, and then there's this thing that I've kind of started, which is the scenario alignment canvas. And those are the team kind of working together, not necessarily based on research, but it's a starting point. So if you really need, I think that's a good way to gauge your team to see how user centric are they really? Because that you have to kind of know.
Yeah, and well, so this is the other thing I wanted to talk about. Like on your channel, Blatz Chats YouTube channel, you've got several videos where you've gone into this thing that you've created, the scenario alignment canvas. So you want to talk about that a little bit and sort of explain how this is maybe a complement to some of the other research, or is this replacing other deliverables, or how do you see? Well, first, I guess explain it, and then how might you use it?
So you can probably tell from my tone, I'm not a huge persona fan. And I was asked to write the persona playbook for where I work. And I was like, what? No. They're like, yeah, that's going to be done by you. So I got to thinking about what I interviewed a lot of people about personas and what are their pain points and what are their experience with them, product owners, business analysts, researchers, designers, how are you using them, right? And found out what we've already talked about. I think they're cool and great, but I don't ever actually use them. So what I did was create this thing called the SAC Scenario Alignment Canvas, which is multi-purpose. First, it focuses on a scenario. Now, the scenario is inspired by Indy Young, where you really focus on a person doing a thing, a very specific thing. She talks about a person traveling through an airport, someone who is a businessman or woman who goes through the airport every week for business travel is going to have a different experience than a person who is a mom with 3 little kids in tow going to visit grandma and she never goes to the airport. Those are going to be different experiences through the airport. And it's those nuances that come down to the design level. That's the problem with personas. They're too generic to make design decisions. So think about it. If your persona says, I want to be financially healthy, what the hell does that mean? How do you design for that? I have no idea. And neither do designers. It's too generic. So if we're talking about a person who, let's say they want to get a credit card and they want to get a credit card to improve their credit. That's different than a person who wants a credit card for travel points. Sure, everybody wants travel points, but companies don't give you that if you have really poor credit. So if you're a person who, let's say you have really poor credit and you hear a credit card can help with that credit, and you're not used to this credit card thing. This is maybe your first one, or you don't have many of them. That designing for that scenario is very different. And that is the level that you can start to get down into to talk about real design solutions and opportunities there. Do you see the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I going back to enterprise too, you mentioned, sometimes people will focus on roles or something, user roles or job titles or whatever. And just thinking back to my experience, very complicated aerospace industry, it's very complex. And you've got these veterans that have been doing it for 20 years that understand everything, right? And that person, I'll just call him like an engineer, whatever, be simple. You've got an engineer with 20 years of experience and an engineer right out of school, first job, using this tool. They're going to approach that system very differently, right? And could be mental models might be different. Could be, I'm tech native versus, what's the other one? Tech native versus whatever the other one is, or somebody who was introduced to it later. You know what I'm talking about, right? So I grew up with the phone in my hand versus, I can barely type and I have to hunt and peck for the keyboard on the keyboard. And so, I love that because it's very different the way you, and what's nice about this too is thinking about this designing it for, that newbie, making it easy for them, it also makes it easy for the, veterans as well, right? It doesn't have to be overly complicated. It will be complicated for sure, but it doesn't have to be overly complicated. So anyway, I just love that idea of the scenario alignment canvas. So the alignment part, that tells me then that there is a conversation with people and you're trying to get alignment. So talk about that. How do you mentioned going through this and having it be a conversation with stakeholders and others and things like that. Where's that alignment come into play?
Sure. Good question. So I think of it generally is a workshop. I'm usually working in a digital whiteboard and I have certain boxes that we are filling in as a team as we go. And I think of this as multi-purpose. The SAC can be I look at it as a kickoff document. It's like, hey, let's dump out everything that we know in these categories in this canvas. So everything is in one place. And it's great to have a cross-functional team. So we have a lot of smart people here bringing in different perspectives. Maybe you're new to the company. Maybe you've been here a while. You all know a little bit about a person who's trying to do this thing, or you're guessing, right? And assumptions and guesses are okay because there's an opportunity to surface those as you go through this process. So it's a kickoff document. Let's gather everybody in one place. Let's all talk about the things about the scenario, this person trying to do a thing. And then what makes this true to my heart is you're surfacing research opportunities. So you're going through the canvas, you're filling in, there's 3 major sections. The first one is goals and motivations. Okay, person's trying to do this thing. What are they trying to do? Why? Exploring that as a team. Okay. The next one is tasks and what are they trying to do this thing? It might be in our product and it might not. So capturing all of that. Then the last thing is pain points. Yep, there could be a struggle to get this thing done. And so you as a team start to explore that. Now, this is where, Jeremy, we talked about personas. I think you need to get a feel for the team and you need to get a feel for how confident they are in their knowledge. And this is where the SAC does that, because somebody will be like, oh, every person who signs up for a credit card to improve their credit has a score of 400. I'm like, what data do you have to back that up? How do you know that's the situation? And usually people are like, I don't really have data. I just know. Well, when somebody says, I just know, okay, good for you, but maybe not. So it's the opportunity to have those discussions around, oh, we think this is the case. Should we explore that further? Should we do more research on that to be closer to confidence? Oh, yeah. Because I don't know, Jeremy, if you've ever had this where I have had this where I have worked with my team and I'm like, hey, what questions do you have? What do you wish you knew more about? Crickets. They don't know. But if you have it around a topic, then it's a little easier to be like, oh, yeah, I think that might be true, but I'm not 100% sure. Let's check it out.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that I was going to say, and you just called this out, but the idea of bringing those people together and surfacing those known unknowns, or even the questions that we have, or the things we're unsure about, is an opportunity to then go and explore more. So I like that a lot. So let me ask you this: when you think about jobs to be done, when you think about other things like personas, the scenario alignment canvas, the SAC. I love that, by the way. The SAC. How do you use that in relation to other artifacts? Does it complement other things, or do you like to go take this and then deliver something else later and you or use it as a conversation? Or how do you keep these things alive, or how do you keep the conversation going?
So it can be done at a great time is when you are new to a team and you can play dumb, teach me all the things. I'm new to the team. I need my product owners, whoever is part of that cross-functional team, developers, BAs, whatever it might be, teach me about this product. So this product does this. Let's get this down to a nuance of a person doing a thing. And it's a great place for SMEs to share their knowledge with you in a kind of cloaked, I'm trying to learn kind of thing. But what you're also trying to do is assess the team a little bit. Where do they think they know everything? And you're like, I don't know, maybe not. We should probably dig a little deeper and find out a little bit more. So you can do it when you first join a team, or you can do it when you're launching a product and you're kind of thinking about doing that, or a feature or something, finite, a little smaller. Don't be like, oh, I'm launching financial health product. Well, no, that's too broad. You need a person is never asking for a financial health product. They're asking to solve a problem. So, in a sense, if you repackage this is a person trying to do a thing, but it's also kind of like the problem that you're trying to solve for them. So, you can do it when you are starting a new feature, or you can do it when the team's like kind of off the rails and you're like, God damn it, you think you know everything. I think there's a lot of bullshit flying around here.
Yeah.
So let me do this workshop. And it takes like an hour or two. And then the team kind of sees that, oh, yeah, okay, we have some gaps in knowledge here. It's really hard to pry that out sometimes when they think they're so competent. But when you ask them for the data to back it up, you see it to start to fall apart.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I was just thinking too, I don't know if this is something you do, but looking at the SAC, it's a very simple document. It's, scenario at the top and your goals and motivations, needs and tasks, pain points and things you want to learn more about. So it's really just, five simple little questions. And so I could easily see this too being a sort of used inside of a stakeholder interview where it's just a one-on-one conversation. Because it depends on the team, but I've been in scenarios where you've got that one stakeholder that just dominates the conversation. And so you do a workshop with them, right? And everyone's going to default to them. They're going to look at that person over on the other end of the table and let them answer the question. So, this is a really great opportunity, I think, even to just sort of highlight the gaps behind the scenes and then even, bring everybody together and say, I just had conversations with the five of you and you all disagree. Everybody has a different opinion here. And that's where I think that alignment piece is really interesting and thinking about. But seems like a very simple conversation starter, if nothing else. And I don't know. I love the SAC.
It really is.
I love the name. I love the process.
I mean, it really is simple. Like, it's not rocket surgery here, folks. I'm just trying if you think about what is valuable to a UX designer and hopefully a product person in a persona is those motivations, the things they're trying to do, their needs, their pain points. These are all the elements of a proto persona and then a research informed full on persona. So in a sense, it's a framework to create a proto persona too. You could use it as that. So, and then what I like as a researcher is those opportunities to learn more. But it's really optional. If you're like, I don't have a researcher, or we don't have the time, I don't think it's ideal not to follow up on this stuff, but at least acknowledging that, hey, we have some gaps here. Let's not just plow through on assumptions. Maybe take a pause and say, yeah, we're not confident about this part of it. So let's not just throw that in as 100% sure.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this then, thinking more about the things that a lot of designers fall into the sort of trap of being told to go create artifacts. They are told by somebody, a stakeholder, a leader who is not a designer or something. Because let's face it, a lot of times people end up on these teams. UX has very little control, low design maturity, and so they're told, let's go build personas, right? How can an individual contributor kind of influence those leaders and help move the conversation away from personas to something more useful and beneficial?
Yeah, that is something I really struggle with because for some weird reason, executives think when they have a persona in hand, it's all the answers. And you can't call them out and say, what the hell are you using that for? Like, you just can't do it, right? I don't know, you just can't. So, talking about like outcomes, right? I don't create I might create a summary document of some of the highlights from this. I don't create a persona from this. It's a canvas for anybody to pop in and out whenever they want to, maybe add something along the way. I haven't really had that in my experience, but it's more about the outcomes. So what is the outcome of a SAC? Well, you started to have some conversations. You brought a cross-functional team together and you're starting to talk about things and you're focusing on the user. Notice I'm not saying, what is our product trying to do? No, we are focusing on a user. And we don't have those conversations enough. We talk about how what we build is going to save the day, but we don't talk about, well, what does that person actually need to save the day? So convincing others not to do personas and just start and have something a little more simple, fly by night like this. Honestly, this doesn't have a shelf life of forever, and it's not across multiple lines of business and and different use cases is pretty specific, but it's specific for a reason because it's to help the team focus on solving this problem. Personas don't help the team focus on solving a problem often. They're just too generic.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, again, like giving specific advice is difficult because stakeholders are not monoliths, and the way you can influence one might be very different than the way you influence another. But, we mentioned before just sort of these one-on-one conversations with stakeholders and stakeholder interviews. And I think just doing that in general is a fantastic way to get to know your stakeholders. Actually, it's funny because I used to work with some guys, and we didn't do this on our team, but they had done it in the past. And I thought this was really smart, but they made stakeholder personas for themselves internally to get a better sense for, because back in my old company, we had this thing called the leadership program. And it was this like program where right out of school you join and then you're sort of like the fast track to CEO basically. And, they got a lot of perks and all these trainings and things. And so that person was very different from this sort of industry veteran who came out the military and, that kind of stuff. So, we kind of created these they created these personas to sort of think about how they might influence different stakeholders and work with different stakeholders and stuff like that. So, even then there's a lot of problems with that because someone coming out of the military might be very different from someone else who came out of the military. But anyway, I thought that was a really interesting way to sort of take personas and flip it and then use a persona to think
That
about
is really cool. Were they called like asshole Andy and jerk John?
I don't know. It wasn't my team, but he just talked about how they used to do it. Yeah, I actually that's funny. I wonder if like they ever actually showed any of the stakeholders the personas that they made about them. Anyway, but it's funny though. I don't know. It's hard. A lot of times people cringe at this idea, but as design professionals, UX professionals, we talk about empathy for users all the time, and I think it's so important to influence. If you can't influence, if you don't have empathy for these stakeholders and understand where they're coming from and the pain points they have and the needs and the goals and all the things that they have, it's like kind of thinking about this. I was just funny. If you're having trouble influencing your team, what if you use the scenario alignment canvas to create these things for a stakeholder to better influence them to use this framework for other stuff? So anyway, I don't it's like a SAC inception there. I don't know.
I love it. No, really. I mean, if you think about the purpose, it is kind of a kickoff document, a starting place, a fresh slate. Think of it as that, right? And alignment. And alignment is bringing people together, sharing their expertise, having conversations, focusing on a thing rather than all the things, right? So what you're focusing on usually as a user, because I find that other non-UX folks struggle with doing that, devoted to doing that. Yes, I want to do right by the user and my product does this. It's like the disconnect. They fall over immediately, right? So I do see some value. And I love stakeholder reviews as well. I'm a huge fan. I do them every time I join a project or join a new company. I want to get to know you. I want to get to know your experience with research. How do you feel about it? Do you think it's bullshit? Okay, that's fair. I know you're going to be a challenge, so we're going to work on that. But at least I know coming out what your expertise is when it comes to research, or your experience is probably more so, and what you believe in. And I think like personas is just one of those things that it's institutional. The same with journey maps. I struggle with journey maps too. I think there's value in journey maps, but are you often solving for the whole journey? Not always. Sometimes you might be solving for just a piece of it. So does mapping out the whole journey help you solve this one little problem that you are tasked to solve? No, but a scenario alignment canvas will, because you are focused on that one little thing. Now, other parts of the org having a journey map, great, that could be very useful for them. But I don't think a journey map is a solution to everything either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. All right. So we talked a lot about alternatives and we talked a lot about things that you could do that are not personas. Let's assume that a team is just stuck using a persona. They just have to. That's what they've been tasked to do. It's what people expect. How can a team make the best of that crappy situation and deliver great work? Do you have any tips for them to, you're stuck using persona. How can you make this beneficial? How can you make this useful? How can you get people to keep it top of mind so it doesn't die in a repository somewhere?
Well, I say you just throw out the pitchforks and catch the CEO on fire. No, I'm just kidding. You just have to leave the company because it's all lost. No, just kidding there too. You can have discussions around, I think personas are great at grounding conversations sometimes. It depends on what's in them. And, people build personas in so many different ways. And if there's somebody that's really bought into that and you're like, yeah, 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 kind of playing along. Yep, I agree. You know, Jonesy, Johnny, whatever the persona is, this would solve this problem. How? But maybe propose a sack through Jones and Johnny's lens, right? Like, let's dig a little deeper. Because and also, I don't know, if you're brave, you can call them out and say, okay, so tell me how this data in this persona informs a design decision. Well, they need financial help. Okay, what's that mean? What does that look like? How does that translate into solving a problem or helping a person's tasks? How does that meet their needs? Really breaking it down, like what's missing from a persona is the specificity to solve a problem, in my experience. And if you're too specific, then you're going to have a shit ton of personas, probably.
Yeah. And the other thing I was just thinking about too is, depending on who your stakeholders are, obviously, some might be more familiar with personas, some might not, some might have heard the term and really had no idea what it is. One of the things that I think you could do is just get a little sneaky and, do whatever you want and call it a persona. And a lot of times these stakeholders probably won't even really know the difference, So anyway, I don't know. Just, call it a persona, name it whatever the hell you want. I think the at the end of the day, again, the goal for all of this is to get the people outside of the UX team to understand the people that you're building the software for, the problems that you're trying to solve, and try to think more about that outcome, like you said, versus, just building a bunch of crap because somebody said to build it. And at the end of the day, I think whatever, deliverable, whatever artifact you want to use, it's got to be part of the conversation when decisions are being made, something to reference, and a living document that, doesn't just sit in a repository somewhere and expect stakeholders to go and look at it because they're never going to do it.
Repositories are the graveyard of UX research. I mean, they're a great storage place, but nobody goes in there hunting around for things. And if they do, it's usually something that's super old. And the replacement that was done not 5 years ago, but 2. Oops, we forgot to put that in the repository. So then they get the wrong data and it's older. So yeah, to your point, Jeremy, there's still a lot of talk where I am about building personas. And I try to keep a deep breath. I have no poker face. So I'm like, don't look at me because you can tell I hate them.
Yeah, turn your camera off. I don't know what's wrong. My camera's just not working today. I don't know what's going on.
Exactly. But to your point, you could use the SAC and build it, use the information in that and build a persona. That's why I say it's kind of a preliminary proto-persona. What are you doing to build a proto-persona? You're getting this data from the team anyways. So this is just a more formalized focus on this thing versus, a person who wants financial health. What are their motivations? Well, what about it? They want to improve their credit and they feel like they can do it via a credit card. Okay, now we can start to have some conversations around that.
And you just mentioned this too. There's a lot of these things that you would be asking or things that you're filling out on something like the SAC. Actually, every time I say that, I'm going to giggle. But anytime you're talking to somebody, you're probably getting this information. And the nice thing about any framework or methodology is it's repeatable. And so I can have a conversation. You can have a conversation. Jim, Jane, we can all have conversations with 4 or 5 different stakeholders and get the same information so we can compare apples to apples versus, well, we're going to go talk to stakeholders and then you forget to ask something or you ask it in a different way or, somebody else. And so we aren't as confident that the answers are actually comparable. So, if nothing else, it's just a great way to just record and build off a creative, maybe an interview script or something for your stakeholders. So I love that. So the last thing I want to talk about today before we get out of here is, regardless of what method we use, personas, jobs to be done, anything else, how can a team keep those things from wasting away in a repository? Do you have any tips and tricks or advice for people to keep all this stuff surfaced so that it does not die in the repo?
Jeremy, if I knew how to keep people's eyes on something in a repository, I would not be here.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, no, really. It's making them aware whenever I've thought about this. Whenever anybody joins the company, share their personas with them, share these artifacts with anybody who's new to the team. Just keep them in conversations, keep bringing them up. See if, hey, has anything changed since we did this persona?
Mhm.
Do we want to focus like a scenario off of this persona a little bit? See how we could solve that problem for this type of person? So just kind of keeping them updated. That's the hardest part, isn't it? When you've got that nice big journey map that's printed on the wall and you're like, "What's this?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we that was a third party vendor we used and we don't use them anymore. And now this whole thing falls apart. So we should probably take it down, but it looks cool and it makes UX look fancy, so we're keeping it up." So it's keeping things up to date so that your
Mm.
teammates know it's a reliable source. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the strongest way to keep these things kind of alive.
I love that. And that's the other thing I think that people fail here, that they make a fancy thing, they put it, maybe they're going to design it in Figma and all this stuff, and it looks really nice and that's great. But then when something changes, nobody ever takes the time to update it. So if you can make it simple, dirty, text-based even, I mean, you don't even need photos. What do you need photos? You don't need colors. You don't need, nobody's seeing this. Customers are never seeing this. Yeah, you use nice type and data, type topography to build your data hierarchy and stuff, sure. But it doesn't need to be overly designed. And so keeping that something that we used to try to do, and to be perfectly honest, this was not as successful as we had hoped, but we worked at a place that lean was very big, not lean UX, but lean, right? Manufacturing and stuff. And so standard work was big and all that stuff. So we worked to get, reviews put in place for standard work. How do we do, and we did safe. So we had big room reviews and all those things. So we were like, how do we get this information put on in the standard work so that it was always something we reviewed before we did this other thing? Or how do we get in the process, and stuff. And it was very bureaucratic and a lot of red tape, but it wasn't completely successful because a lot of times people ignore that stuff anyway. Just because you wrote down standard work doesn't mean people are going to follow it.
Right? Maybe not. That kind of I call it research radiator or
Mhm.
kind of sharing it out. Where I was before, we had a Thursday once a month, all the different research and data teams came together for a quick share out. And what's the data analyst learning? What is the market researcher learning and working on? What is this UX research team learning versus this one? And it was, at least, if nothing else, it puts a face to this kind of effort that you can be like, "Oh, wait, that Jill girl, I don't know what she did again, but it's some data and I don't know what data is, so I'm going to go hit her up." Like, it's a way to build relationships or to tie the threads, as I would say, right? And so if you can do that, and I'm telling you, you never know who might read that email and might be like, "Oh my God, I have some info that is similar to that or might help you." Or, "Hey, if you ever want to talk about this, I'm on the phones with these folks and I'm happy to chat to you." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to pick your brain about these phone calls." Right. And if you don't send out an information like that, or if you don't share what you're doing, they're never going to know you exist. But now that they do, you can establish that relationship with them potentially. You never know when you're going to need somebody, and then hit them up someday when you need to know a little bit more.
All right. So, Jen, we've had you for a little while today. Before we get out of here, I got some questions I like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. But before we do that, any closing thoughts? Anything that we did not cover that you think is important for everybody to know about personas and how they're not so great?
Classic closing research question. A man after my heart, for sure. Is there anything else you would like to add? Just ask me the magic wand question and we'll be all set. Really,
If you could wave a magic wand for this interview today, what would you change?
exactly. I would say, Jeremy, you had a good connection earlier when you said if someone comes to you and they said, "We need personas," maybe bringing them along in this process and say, "We're going to build personas together. We're going to tap into everyone's collective knowledge." And to your point, these aren't really personas, they're proto personas, but we're going to match your language so that we're meeting you where you are, right? So bringing them in, you say, "Yeah, I can build personas, but I'm going to need the expertise of the team. This is a group effort. You all have really important info I'm going to tap into to make this more robust and closer to a finished product." And if they're like, "No, you go do it yourself," I don't know, you might have to think about, are they really invested if they don't want to contribute their own knowledge to the process.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can't stress that enough. The taking the stakeholder along, making them a part of the process, the idea of the IKEA effect where they feel like they've built it. So they're more likely to promote it themselves and use it. Oh, we spent all this time. I can't waste it. So just bringing them along, having them be a part of it. Obviously, you need their input anyway, unless you're going off and talking to users or maybe they don't know the answers. But even then, like have them come along as a note taker or have them just sit in and, keep your mouth shut, don't talk. But, come along and just observe that kind of stuff. I think it's just so important. And so often, UX teams, whether they're designers or researchers, just go off and say, I'll be back in 6 months with all the answers. And I don't know, generally speaking, that doesn't always work. So I love it. All right, Jen. Well, like I said, I have got a few questions that I like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. First thing that comes to your mind, what is your favorite non-design book?
Well, non-design book. Well, I'm going to say it's still a UX book. It just came out kind of recently, version 2 of User Experience Team of One.
Yeah.
It was written by Leah Bewley, and then Jo Natoli and her did a second version. And I just read it over the Thanksgiving holidays, toward the end of the year. And I didn't really compare the two books to be like, oh, this is a new part, this is a regurgitation or whatnot. But it is such a good book it is such a poorly titled book, to be honest, because it is not for a UX team of one. Some of the things apply, but it's really just for a UX person. And if you are ever struggling to bring your partners along or even know what method to do or how to start a conversation to bringing UX into your organization, it encompasses a lot of things. And this is why it's still my favorite UX book. Anybody asks me, I want to get into UX, what should I read? You should read this because it's not about, you're all by yourself and you're the only UX person and you're screwed. And no, there's a lot of great tips and resources, even as a senior designer like myself, seasoned professional.
Since you posted that last week, seasoned, it's funny because I went and looked in my book. I'm like, how many times did I say seasoned in this stupid book? And I had to go back and change it. And anyway, yeah. So I think I might have missed a couple but yeah, seasoned.
I'm the
Salt
same.
Bay, throwing the salt in it. Sorry.
Totally the same. So it's a great book for beginners or people who are transitioning into UX or trying to figure this thing out. It's a really great book. It's my fave still after all this time.
Yeah, I haven't picked up the second edition, but I actually got Jo Natoli coming on the show soon. We're going to talk about it. But
I think I'm going to chat with him too.
Right on. Yeah, he's probably making the rounds, I'm sure. All right, next up, what is your favorite non-design podcast?
Obviously, it's Beyond UX, right? That's my favorite podcast.
Get out of here. Get out of here. You don't need to butter me up. You're already on.
Should I make it a promo? Watch Beyond UX now.
There you go. On YouTube. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
To be honest, I don't really listen to podcasts. I used to more so when I commuted into work, but now as a remote employee and I have about a 30 stair climb to my office, I'm not going to get any really great quality podcasts in that time. But I do like to read a lot of articles and newsletters and just kind of get snippets. Obviously, I'm surfing LinkedIn a lot. I think that that's a great resource for a lot of different perspectives and information. Some of it's getting a little too personal. I'm like, I don't really want your Facebook posts here, but hey, you do you. I don't care. But I just generally, I tend to read more than podcasts or watching webinars or go to conferences. I like to go to conferences. So it's so much about the networking and the meeting of people in conferences more so than actual content usually for me. But those are some of the resources that I tap into to kind of stay fresh on the UX world.
I love it. Yeah, no, that's great. I don't get to go to many conferences, especially being self-employed now, nobody's paying for that now. I got to come up with thousands of dollars for a freaking ticket, plus airfare. And usually hotels are ridiculously expensive.
Yes.
Because of, capitalism.
Right, exactly. Well, the conference, if it's usually a conference I'm speaking at, so hotel and flights are covered, so I'm in. Travel to Austria? Okay.
Yeah, I need to pick your brain about some of this because I want to get into the conference speaking game. I got a good talk that I give.
You could totally do it. Yeah.
The UX uncertainty principle. It's a good talk.
Oh,
I've been shopping it around. I've been doing it like IXDA and some other folks. Anyway, I need to pick your brain about that. I need to
Okay.
get into that. Free trips to Europe. I'm down. All right. What is your favorite meal? This could be something you've cooked, something your grandma used to cook.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's sort of both. My favorite meal is my homemade spaghetti sauce, which I am not Italian at all, but it was my mother would make a big, huge pot of spaghetti sauce and, you freeze it and it gets jiggy with it and it lasts for weeks or months. But I love my homemade spaghetti sauce. The key to my sauce is I don't use I do cans of tomatoes and whatnot. I don't use any sauce. For the sauce part, I use crushed tomatoes. So makes it thicker and loads of diced tomatoes. So really a chunky sauce and spicy Italian sausage. So that is my favorite meal is my spaghetti sauce.
I love it. And you do the sausage, do you put peppers and onions in it? You do
Onions, yes. I don't put peppers in it. I put a lot of mushrooms in it. And then obviously there's meatballs, and those are usually a multi-meat kind of meatball. Sorry to my vegetarian friends out there. But yeah, it's spaghetti sauce all the way.
All right. Well, if you're ever doing it with Italian sauce, especially spicy Italian sausage.
Oh, I do use it spicy Italian sausage, but I don't use peppers.
Ooh. Well, peppers and sausage, I don't know what it is. They just go, I'm making weird hand gestures here. You can't see. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. But peppers and sausage, I don't know, peppers and onions and sausage. It's a beautiful thing. My grandma used to do this thing. You do links of sausage and you do in a red gravy and you braise the sausage in the red gravy. We used to call it red gravy. I don't know why. But anyway, we would braise the Italian sausage in the red gravy and you throw like not chopped. It's like diced, sliced. I don't know. Anyway, whatever it was. I don't know the correct term. Onions and peppers with Italian sausage. Ah, so good.
Did you get grandma's recipe to do that?
No, nobody did. Died with her. She didn't write it down.
I have an aunt who makes the most fantastic homemade chicken and noodles, and we have tried a million times for her to share it. And she'll give her half-assed recipe, and we're like, is there chicken in it? Because she'll neglect like the most critical ingredient. And she's like, yes, of course. What a stupid question. I'm like, well, what else are you forgetting?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Do you ever watch Young Sheldon, that show Young Sheldon?
I used to. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
They had an episode where they were trying to get the brisket recipe from her and she kept like making up all these like so nobody knew exactly what was in her brisket. Anyway, really funny stuff.
I mean, brisket recipes are pretty sacred. I kind of get that. I'm down in Texas. Like, this is the brisket. This might be up for debate, but man, brisket down here, untouchable.
Yeah, I love a good brisket, but I've never tried to make it because it's not easy. It ain't easy.
No.
All right, next up, what is your favorite vacation spot?
So my favorite spot is probably not one that a lot of people listening to you, Jeremy, may have been to, which is a small town called Paso Robles, kind of in central California. I'd say it's halfway between Los Angeles and San Francisco. And it's a beautiful wine country region where it's not like stark mountains, but it's hilly. There's vines all over the hills. It's beautiful. It's great weather. I was just there over the Thanksgiving weekend. I hadn't been there in years. And you're just standing on top of a hill and looking at the hills and valleys and having great wine. That is my favorite vacation spot by far.
Love it. I've never heard of it. So it's like sort of like Napa, but maybe cheaper, I guess, because it's not as well known.
And less pretentious and less asshole. I mean, that you're right. Because I've been to wine regions all over the place. Went to Napa one time and everyone was like so snooty and snobby and like, oh, what kind of car did you drive up in? I'm like, a rental car. Fuck you. Yeah. What's the matter?
Yeah, I got this Chevy thing that the Hertz gave me. What do you
exactly?
You didn't spend an extra $200 a day for the Beamer?
No.
All right.
Hard pass.
Hard pass. All right. I'd rather spend $200 a day on wine, not cars.
Exactly. Easily.
All right. Last question. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
So, Jeremy, I'm old school. I'm going to show my age here a little bit. And some of my first design tools were Photoshop. I think I started on Photoshop 3. I don't even know what version it is now because they don't number them at all. It's like Photoshop 2025. I think there's a number underneath, right? Isn't there a version?
Yeah, they're up to 20 something. Some of them depends on which one. Like Illustrator's like 25, or I guess is that years? I don't know. Maybe now that I'm thinking about it, maybe that's years.
Yeah, well, it wasn't years because I didn't start designing in 1903. So it wasn't years, But like I said, I went to school to study. It was journalism graphics specifically. So designing and creating visual assets for publications. And so Photoshop, freehand, and PageMaker were the big design tools that I used. But to this day, I still use Photoshop for photo manipulation. Now, I use about maybe 5% of what Photoshop actually has because that fucker is huge on scope creep, like huge. I don't know what like most of that stuff in Photoshop is, but that's probably still my favorite design tool.
Yeah, Photoshop, it's obviously, I mean, it's made for photographers, like originally. And it's funny, my wife she got her bachelor's of fine arts down at LSU, and she was telling me about, like dodge and burn and all that stuff, or, tools in Photoshop, but that's like actual photo techniques that you
It
would,
is.
use, I don't know what chemicals maybe, I guess, to add light
It's
or
light.
remove light. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, it just took me back to my J school days. Like I had photography classes and it had to dodge and burn. I'm like, yes, I have used those tools in Photoshop. For me, it's mostly cutouts and color correction, photo manipulation now, which tools like Figma and Canva, like they can do a lot of that now. You don't even need Photoshop.
Yeah, well, Figma still falls very short when it comes to
Does it?
editing pixels. Yeah, it doesn't really work nearly as well. And Photoshop, it can do so much more editing actual photographs.
I've been cutting out in Photoshop and then taking it in Figma because I was like, I just feel like I can control it more over here.
Yeah, Figma's better for vectors, so more of like a replacement for Illustrator. Still, Illustrator does a whole lot more than Figma. I was just looking at my Creative Suite, Creative Cloud. Pro tip, if you want a discount, buy it on Black Friday. Get the year discount for half off, and then just make up a new email every year when you want to renew. Pro tip, if you want a cheaper version of Creative Cloud. But they're up to 26.1, Photoshop, version 26.1.
Okay.
So it is not going by year. And then Illustrator is up to 29.1. Which is nuts. So yeah, 29. I guess they do more updates to Illustrator than Photoshop. Because Photoshop's older than Illustrator. So
because I was using freehand before Illustrator existed.
Yeah, that was because that Corel? Freehand was that was Macromedia.
No, it was it was Mac based. Macromedia.
Yeah, and then Adobe bought Macromedia and then killed all the Macromedia stuff except for Dreamweaver. All right, Jen, this has been so much fun talking to you today. I definitely learned quite a bit about personas and jobs to be done and your SAC framework, the scenario alignment canvas. I think that's really cool. We will link to all of that stuff in the show notes. So if you want to check out YouTube videos that Jen has done talking about this scenario alignment canvas, we will link to all that in the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. So make sure to check that out. Jen, before we get out of here though, give yourself a plug. Let everybody know where they can find you and all your content and all that stuff. Give yourself a plug.
Sure. Look for me on YouTube, known as Blatz Chats with a Z, one word. I talk about professional development, UX research. I interview UX pros. I even interviewed Steve Jobs a few times about the election this year. Huh? Check that out if you want a good laugh. Blatz Chats is where you'll find me.
I love it. All right. And we will link to all that stuff in the show notes. Jen, one more time, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This has been so fun, as I knew it would be, but thank you for the opportunity. It's been great.
Well, all right, y'all. That's it for Jen and me for today. I hope we helped to shed a little bit of light on why personas might not be working as well for you and your team as you think. But what do you think? Have personas worked well for you and your team? Have you tried the Jobs to be Done framework yet, or any other framework? Has that worked out well for you? I'd love to know. Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That would help me out so much more than you know. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, then why don't you tell them about it? That would be fantastic. Don't forget to check out the Beyond UX Design shop. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop to pick up some big, beautiful UX-themed art prints and digital downloads you can print yourself. Get free shipping on all orders over $30 and use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your entire order. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop to get your print on. Help keep the show independent and ad-free. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/support to find out how. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free. And you'll get rough transcripts and exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. And you can get instant access to those video archives right now for as little as $5 a month. Do yourself a favor and head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/storytelling and use the promo code BeyondUX at checkout to get 10% off Jeff's storytelling course to learn some super valuable ways to influence your team and advance your UX career. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all. And you just mentioned this too. I mean, a lot of these things that you would be asking or things that you're filling out on something like the SAC. Actually, every time I say that, I'm going to giggle.